Welcome to the darkest part of justice, where extreme punishment occurs. From faulty procedures that will make your skin crawl to unexpected twists that will leave you confused, these are the deadliest death row executions that will stay with you long after you finish the video. But be warned, the stories you will hear are not for fragile hearts. They are cruel and frightening and will make you question all you thought you knew about justice. So, if you're prepared to accept the awful facts of the death penalty, enter the maze of the most deadly death row executions ever happened. But before we begin, ask yourself, what if the person being executed was innocent? 1. Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. First in line is Timothy McVeigh, the man responsible for one of the worst acts of domestic terrorism in U.S. history. On April 19, 1995, McVeigh blew up a truck bomb in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, killing 168 people, including children. He showed no guilt and even referred to the casualties as collateral damage. McVeigh was sentenced to death and executed by deadly injection on June 11, 2001. What's more shocking? His final words came from a poem by William Ernest Henley. "I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. No apologies, no regret. It's just cold, calculated arrogance." McVeigh's execution was heavily publicized, as he was the first federal prisoner to be executed in 38 years. Families of the victims watched via isolated television, hoping for some sense of closure. However, McVeigh remained calm and unbothered until the very end. 2. John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown. Next, we have John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown, who terrorized Chicago in the 1970s. Gacy was a serial killer who murdered at least 33 young men and boys, burying most of them under his house. By day, he was a respected businessman and part-time clown for children's parties. By night, he was a monster. Gacy was sentenced to death and executed by deadly injection on May 10, 1994. His final meal? Fried chicken, French fries, and Diet Coke. And his final words? "Kiss my ass." Even in death, he was as twisted as ever. But the execution didn't go smoothly. The drugs used in the injection took longer than expected to work, and it took over 18 minutes for him to die. Witnesses described him gasping for air as his body trembled. It was a horrific end for a man who had caused so much suffering. According to psychologists, his behavior was due to his disturbing childhood experiences. He faced mocking, abuse, and scolding from his father because of his feminine habits and attraction towards men. 3. Ronnie Lee Gardner, death by firing squad. Ronnie Lee Gardner was executed in Utah in 2010, and his case was unique. He chose to die by firing squad, a method that hadn't been used in the U.S. for over 14 years. Gardner was guilty of killing a lawyer in 1985, and after spending decades on death row, he was finally executed. He was strapped to a chair, a target was placed on his chest, and 5 shooters fired. 4 rifles had real bullets, 1 had a blank. That way, no one knew for sure who fired the killer shot. Gardner's last words? "I do not want to apologize." What made this execution even more disturbing was Gardner's repeated request for this method. He believed it was more honorable than a deadly injection. He spent his final hours meditating and watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy. 4. Alan Lee Davis. A gruesome electric chair execution. Alan Lee Davis, executed in 1999, is known for one of the most disturbing electric chair executions in history. Convicted of murdering a pregnant woman and her 2 daughters, Davis met his end tied to Old Sparky, Florida's electric chair. But things went wrong. As 2,000 volts passed through his body, blood gushed from his nose. His execution was so brutal that even some supporters of the death penalty started questioning the method. If the goal was a painless death, this was the exact opposite. Photos taken after the execution showed Davis covered in burns, with blood dripping from his mouth. The images sparked outrage and led Florida to switch to lethal injection as its primary execution method. 5. Clayton Lockett, the botched lethal injection. Clayton Lockett's execution in 2014 became infamous for all the wrong reasons. Convicted of brutally murdering a 19-year-old woman, his execution by lethal injection turned into a horror show. The drugs didn't work as planned. He twisted in pain, moaned, and struggled for 43 minutes before finally dying of a heart attack. Witnesses described it as torture, and the case sparked debates about the effectiveness and ethics of lethal injection. The problem? The IV delivering the drugs was improperly inserted, and Lockett's vein collapsed. Instead of an instant death, he suffered for nearly an hour. The execution was so ruined that Oklahoma temporarily suspended all executions to investigate what went wrong. 6. Ted Bundy, the face of evil. If there was ever a face of evil, it was Ted Bundy. A charming, intelligent man who turned out to be one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Bundy admitted to killing over 30 women, but the real number could be much higher. After years of trials and escape attempts, Bundy was finally executed in Florida's electric chair on January 24, 1989. Thousands of people gathered outside, celebrating. His last words, "I'd like to give my love to my family and friends. No shame, no apologies, just another manipulative move from a master manipulator." The crowd outside the prison cheered as the lights flashed, signaling his execution. Some even brought "Burn Bundy Burn" signs and set off fireworks. It was one of the most widely celebrated executions in U.S. history. 7. Gary Gilmore, the man who wanted to die. Gary Gilmore's case was unique because he wanted to be executed. After killing 2 men in 1976, he refused to fight his death sentence and even told his lawyers to stop appealing. On January 17, 1977, he was executed by firing squad in Utah. His final words, "Let's do it." Fun fact, those words supposedly inspired Nike's "Just Do It" slogan years later. Talk about a weird legacy. 8. Stephen LaWayne Nelson. A chilling final moment. Stephen LaWayne Nelson was convicted of murdering a pastor in cold blood inside a church in Texas in 2011. His crime was brutal, and he was sentenced to death. His execution on February 6, 2025 was spooky. His last words were directed at the warden. "Thank you, I am ready." And get this, pet dog was present at the execution. A strangely personal moment in an otherwise dark event. Unlike other cases, his execution was quick and carried out without complications. Additional cases. More deadly executions. While these cases are some of the most infamous, there are many more stories of brutal and fumbled executions. People like William Kemmler, the first person executed by the electric chair, and Tom Ketchum, a cowboy who was chopped during his hanging, show that the death penalty has a long, horrific history. Each case raises new debates about whether these methods are truly humane. There you have the most deadly, shocking, and infamous executions ever recorded. Whether it was a spoiled procedure, a bizarre final request, or a twisted criminal with no guilt, each of these executions has left a mark on history. The death penalty remains one of the most controversial aspects of the justice system. Some argue it brings justice, others believe it's outdated and inhumane. One thing is certain, stories prove that execution isn't always quick, painless, or just. Join us next time as we dive into more stories that will leave you speechless. Until then, stay curious, and maybe sleep with the lights on tonight.